the Latinos Out Loud podcast. Latinos, 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 Latinos. Yeah, that's what it is. Latinos Out Loud, 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 loud.
Hello, hi, it's your friend, tu amiga Rachel La Loca, host of the Latinos Out Loud podcast, LOL, if you enjoy acronyms like I do. And today, there'll probably be some laughing, but this is no laughing matter. I'm really excited to speak with my two guests today that are calling in remotely. We'll find out from where in just a few minutes. It is Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, everyone. I hope you love this planet as much as I do, but this planet needs some love. And there's also the need for storytellers on how we can better love this planet. And that's what we're going to do today. Let me introduce my guests real quick. First, I am allowed to call her Majo, which I love. She's got a great nickname. It's just a combination of all three names. Maria Jose Calderon is producer and editor of Water for Life. Let me read you some of her credits. She was a producer on COVID's Hidden Toll, the Frontline PBS Scripps Howard Award-winning film that explores how the absence of mandatory workplace protections puts essential agriculture workers at risk. She also produced and directed The Edge of the Sea, which is an award-winning environmental documentary for PBS. We love PBS. Okay. She was an associate producer of Elizabeth Farnsworth Emmy Award nominated POV documentary, The Judge and the General, the story of Juan Guzman and Stable Life, stories of undocumented immigrants who live and work on American racetracks. Her resume goes on and on and on. You may have seen the 10-part HBO series that she produced called Outposts, combining experiential journalism with adventure travel reporting. Majo has a master's degree in journalism for the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism, and she's here with us today. Hello, Majo.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And we are accompanied by another distinguished gentleman. Let me introduce Rick Tejada Flores, who's producer of Water for Life. Rick is a documentary filmmaker with more than 40 years of work to his credit. Everybody take a pause and absorb that real quick. 40 years in the industry. Among his credits are The Flight in the Field, Cesar Chavez, and The Farm Worker Struggle, PBS and Sundance Channel, and 3 films for PBS, American Masters, Rivera in America, Jasper Johns, Ideas in Paint, and Orozco, Man of Fire. His resume is also pretty extensive. You may also know him from some other films, including Race is the Place, The Good War and Those Who Refuse to Fight It, and Low and Slow, The Art of Low Riding. Hey, The Art of Low Riding. Rick served as producer on the Emmy and DuPont Columbia award-winning PBS series The Great Depression, and his most recent film, My Bolivia, Remembering What I Never Knew on PBS, is an intimate investigation into his family's distinctive Bolivian roots. Welcome, Rick Tejada Flores, to Latinos Out Loud. Hi, Rick.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. I am such a fan of PBS. I myself was featured on a show called COVID-19, from performers to spectators, which was a really introspective look at how the stages were stripped from some of us performers during COVID, and that's on the PBS Arts Channel. So I also love PBS programming for the sake of its educational value. I have 2 young boys who I don't want their brain to rot, so PBS is a wonderful friend. As a mom, PBS is my friend. So welcome to the show. Congratulations on Water for Life. I got to see the trailer, and it's interesting and it's impactful. I have questions for you both. And, Rick and I were talking a little bit behind the scenes on the process. So I guess that leadoff question is how and why did you get interested in working on this film? And my first question is pointed at Majo. What brought you, or what importance was there in this subject that lured you into producing and editing this film?
Well, I've always been interested in Indigenous rights stories, human rights, and water. So when I was approached by director Will Parrinello to field produce for the Chile story, I was really excited. And then I moved to the U.S. and I became one of the editors, then the editor of the film. And just throughout the process, it's been an amazing learning experience. that has definitely changed my life. But yeah, water rights, indigenous rights, environmental stories have always been at the center of the work that I do, and I'm really proud that I have been part of this project.
Thank you. And now, Rick, the same question for you. And if you wouldn't mind, also a part B to that question is tell us about your process. Because I know documentary filmmaking is very different than the things that we see in the movie theaters, narratives and whatnot. So tell us more about the process.
Well, documentary is a different world. You don't have a script, first of all. So, on a feature film, you know how the scenes are going to work. You know the characters' lines, and you have to make it work. It's a question of performance. In documentary films, you're exploring. You sort of know what's going on, but something interesting happens. Even though you think someone can talk about stuff, it turns out that it doesn't sound very well, or they have trouble with it. So some things you think will work don't work, and you always, tell me another story about what happened. All of a sudden, things you didn't even know about, and those are the things that really make the film. That they're exciting. So, and then Maho is the editor, and I've worked as an editor too. In documentary films, the editor is really the person who crafts the story. Maho made the story work. And the script on a documentary film is done when the film is finished. Really, you use it as editing, but you don't work from a script. You work from general outline of what you want to do, and this character can tell me this. So a lot of times you'll shoot a lot of people that just when you come to editing, it doesn't work. So then you have to say, the editor says, "I'm sorry, this doesn't work. Let's try something else." Or I've worked on films where I thought the films were going right, and the editor says, "You know what? You have too many characters. We have to get through 3 of them." And I said, "No, we can't." And they were right. So, that's the key of the documentary process, to being open what you have to what you have.
Flexibility, right? And I mean, I wonder if working on this project, were there any twists and turns where you had to just stop? Maho's giggling. Like, were there any big twists or turns that you can share with us that happened throughout the process?
Why don't you take that?
So many. Where should I start? Yeah, I mean, as Rick said, there's no script. There's an outline, an idea of what you want to achieve, but there's always things that go wrong or things that surprise you, and you're like, oh, wait, maybe we should talk about this. Like, for example, this was a film about water, and we always wanted to talk about water, but our characters were telling us that it wasn't just about water. This is about territory. This is about way of life. This is about culture. It's about colonialism. Like, there's so many layers, right? So for the sake of your film, you want to keep it simple, but then you kind of are obliged to like listen to what your characters are saying, and you have to be flexible and like how much you want to tell, how much you want to include. Is it too much, too little? So it was just, the editing process was over 3 years. It was a very collaborative process. It wasn't just me. There were many people, which is good. And sometimes it can be also a little chaotic when you have so many voices. Yeah. But it was also during COVID, so we couldn't work together. It was just like me, I'm working one city, like we're all over the place. We didn't see each other for over a year and a half, I think, during the editing process. So it kind of slowed us down. But I think at the end, the film is that good because we waited, we were patient, and things evolved and unfolded during this period. And I'm glad that we waited, because that made the film stronger at the end.
Let me give you an example that really blew me away. One of the stories is about Berta Cáceres, who's a very internationally known environmental warrior. And Will had filmed an interview with Berta before she was killed. Then she's killed. We said, "Oh my God, justice will never be done." So then turns around, all of a sudden, the killers are found and convicted. We didn't know that when we were making the film. We didn't know it was going to happen. All of a sudden, that had to be in the film, because that's how justice is. And it's a pretty rare situation in Latin America if something like that happens and people really held to account. So that was That was huge.
Wow.
And that's an example of, we didn't discover it. The story all of a sudden changed. I mean, it had an ending, as opposed to saying Berta was killed and we'll never know what happened.
Wow. All of a
So
sudden,
that really strikes my mind as something that really made us
thanks for
think.
sharing that. All of a sudden, there was a bit of true crime injected into this film. Wow. Let me read a little bit about Water for Life for the listeners. Water for Life tells the dramatic story of three community leaders in Latin America who resisted government and corporate plans to divert critical local water sources to mining and hydroelectric projects. You mentioned that this became more than just about water. Colonialism. Can you walk us through how that story started to unfold and what about those topics you'd like the viewers to take away from this film?
Well, one of the hardest things Maho had, and we all had with the film, was the fact that we were talking with three characters who lived in three different countries, and we're telling three different versions of essentially the same story. So that's the big thing is, no, this isn't an isolated case in Honduras or Chile or El Salvador. This happens all around the world. So that's all of a sudden you could, an isolated story is a good story, but it may not be important. But when you talk, so that's a huge takeaway. And the other takeaway is that we have a role in it. American corporations are all multinational. So it's not just far away and we can't do anything about it. We can put pressure on those folks here. So those are my takeaways. I don't know what other things struck you about it.
Well, what you said, you see that even though there's three countries, there's a pattern, and this is not something new. And at some point in the film, one of the characters, Berta, specifically talks about it. This is like it's like neo-colonialism. It's a new wave. It's a new land grab that it's happening, not just in Latin America and many other countries as resources get like, they're limited.
The film reveals that while those in power see the exploitation of water resources as one of the keys to economic development, they are often ignoring the legal rights of indigenous communities. So I want to understand more about these legal rights and how we, Latinos here in the United States, how can we help this cause? I, for one, feel like talking about this subject matter on the Latinos Out Loud podcast, driving people to watch the film, that's all going to help. But how can we get more active? How can the extensions of these indigenous communities from afar take more of an active role?
One of the things is we work with partners on the ground. For example, Amnesty International, they have offices around the world. So Amnesty International has gotten involved. And, there are a lot of people here who work with environmental issues and work with organizations. So supporting their programs, what Amnesty does, helps. It really does. And it's pretty hard to do it, but some companies like Gap have been forced to reconsider because of popular campaigns here. They had sweatshops and people working in slave conditions. So, there's a lot we can do. And as you said, we're trying to educate people, because they're not going to do anything unless they understand it. It's too complicated. What are we supposed to do? And also it's not our problem. So it is.
It is our problem. We're all inhabitants of this planet. As Latinos in the United States, we have our indigenous roots and family members in our mother countries. So I do think we need to take more responsibility. And I do applaud you for making this film to elevate awareness of that. Now, if we can get a little scientific, and you guys are going to have to help me out because I have my degree in marketing and I'm a podcaster, although I love science. And, I'm here in a household with two young boys and I love doing homework with them. I really want to get nitty gritty and understand what is the impact that massive mining and hydroelectric projects that are taking place in these indigenous communities, what is the impact that it is having? Why is there such a high alert or urgency on this subject matter?
Well, I'm also not a scientist, but to me, humans as humans, we are part of an ecosystem, so it is science. So access, not having access to clean water, affects us all, right? And water has become every time more scarce. And speaking as someone from Chile, one of the things that was really striking that I knew but I wasn't sure, and I learned throughout the making of the film is that water is private in Chile. At
Mm.
least at that moment when we started the film, it was the only country in the world that we knew that where water it's private. Water stocks are traded in the stock market, and that to me is just wrong. um, Not just for indigenous folks, but for everyone. So I think, and that's kind of answering your the question you did before. I think people should be alert and just know where your water comes from, and just make sure that it is available for all of us and not used as a commodity. Um, yeah, not very scientific answer. Sorry.
But nonetheless, really educational. Water is a human right. We should be allowed to consume water and not it not be a private commodity.
Exactly.
That's mind blowing to me. Rick, do you have any input on this question?
Well, but it's not just water; it's resources in general. The model of neocolonialism is that the developing world can take countries and communities' resources without giving anything back. You know, it's fine if you do mine or whatever, and you really support the community through the process and you listen to them, and you know that's huge. That you know because multi you know, people say countries ruled by governments. I think the world is ruled by corporations at this point. They can do anything they want, and so there's no, you know, there's concept emerging which is sort of environmental justice. You know that you have, we're paying a terrible price, and what are we getting back for it? Nothing. You know, I'm not saying you can make up for the loss of water in a community that depends on it, but you can force the companies to act more responsibly for sure.
I have a follow-up question that sounds somewhat scientific, but based on what I read about the film, I learned that industrial hydroelectric power is promoted as clean energy, but studies show that it's not always sustainable. Can you shed some light on that for us? Like why why is there this misinformation about industrial hydroelectronic electric power?
It is clean, but there's a huge price. You know, it's fine if there's a river that's dammed, but you know, again, if there's a dam in California, it destroys the environment. And there's been a movement to actually take out dams in the West to restore the salmon and things like that. Um, so it's really important. You know, I'm not sure we'll ever get the environment back in balance, but it helps. You know, it's really key to it, I
Well,
think.
and also if you hear about like, okay, they're gonna dam some river somewhere far from where you live, you're not concerned about it because it doesn't affect you. But what about communities where, like, also speaking from like from where I come from in Chile, a lot of the dams in southern Chile have been built in indigenous land without consent from the communities. They come in, they divide the communities. They usually start building, they start these projects, and then they ask, and then it's too late. And in many cases, these dams have been built in sacred sites, burial sites, uh, and yeah, for a company that might not be a problem, but for a community, for can you imagine if that was the reverse case? Like you had someone from Chile coming here and like damming the cemetery where all your ancestors are buried. Like it's, you can't even think about it. So these type of things are not being done to everybody. They usually do it to impoverished communities and indigenous communities because they don't always have the means to fight back the resources. Um, So what I like about our film is that the communities did fight back and they won. I mean, there was losses, huge sacrifices. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but they're stories that are not going to make you feel necessarily sad, but empowered. You're going to learn, you're going to get inspired, and hopefully want to learn about these issues in your own communities, because these are topics that affect us all everywhere.
And that also that theoretically local governments where this happens have some responsibility. So Chile and other countries, Salvador too, have laws that require that local communities be consulted. And the story in Chile was at one point they said, well, there aren't any native people there. Not true. And they're consulted after the fact, not in making the decision to do it. So I mean, the deal is if there's laws, they have to be enforced. Otherwise, they're meaningless. It's the Chilean laws. Many of them were passed under Pinochet, the dictator. They've never been repealed. Wow. So fighting those legislative things. In Salvador, they passed a law outlawing mining, metallic mining. There's a conservative political movement now which is controlling that's trying to repeal the law. Start over again.
Fascinating.
And so and the issue is certainly you care if you're affected, but you have to be concerned about other people. Yeah. It doesn't matter they're in a poor country, and that the kinds of things Trump said. I just don't think that's responsible or human to do that.
Thank you for sharing that, Majo. I love what you said about how to get more involved here. So I understand that you had to travel to Latin America a whole bunch of times. Tell us about the different processes you had to endure. Was there a research and discovery phase? Were there soul trips where all you did was shoot and shoot and shoot? How did the community embrace you arriving in these sacred grounds?
Well, we're talking about Water for Life, right? Specifically,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This Water for Life it's been in the making for over 10 years, and I joined during the past 4 years. So I specifically joined when they were filming in Chile. So I was the field producer while I was still living in Chile. So I didn't travel there. I was living there, and I was the contact on the ground. And my work basically was to see if there was a story, get the character trust, to get to know the community, and their consent. Of course, I had to go to a big gathering where the whole community came. They asked me questions, and I explained to them what we were trying to do and asked if it was okay to make a film. And that's the way that I like working, and it was great. But I wasn't part of the filming in El Salvador or Honduras. When I joined, most of the footage had already been filmed. But in the case of Chile, it was the first part of the first couple of months were just getting the community's trust, going at first without a camera, just spending time, having some tea, some mate with the elders, and just talking, because there's a lot of people that come and want to make films about them, and there's a whole extractive industry and film industry that go to places, tell stories, then leave and become famous and forget about the communities. And they were aware of that, so they didn't give me a hard time, but it was definitely a long process, and I respected it because I understood where they were coming from. And at the end, it was worth it, I think, because to me, it's really important that they like the final product, that they're proud of it, and they're actually now on their own. I know the community in Chile, they're traveling to different communities, indigenous communities, showing the film. And that's just really amazing to see.
How did the community accept the final product? What was the feedback that you received?
Well, there's a fine line. Like, you don't want to be I don't know, showing the film. And I mean, in some cases they can say, okay, I don't like this, remove it. But that didn't happen. I mean, I don't remember. Do you remember, Rick? But I know that we showed them like one of the final rough cuts, and they loved it. Especially Alberto, he was really impressed. He thought we were doing. I mean, a lot of these communities, and I can speak for a fact because Alberto told me he had never seen a documentary before, so they thought that a documentary was more like a news report. So they were really touched by the depth. They didn't know that it was going to be such a huge story where we follow like our characters and their journey for like, in some cases for like many years. There's like big processes unfolding on the screen. And in the case of Alberto and his community too, like he saw from the beginning they got organized and all the things they went through. Um, and so yeah, he liked it, and that was a big relief for all of us, of course. But yeah, it makes us feel good that we did not only make a good film, that people wherever we've shown it, film festivals, people like it, are very receptive, but also they feel seen, and they feel that we told their story in a way that they see, they feel represented, they like it. So that's really important for us, for me as a filmmaker at least.
That's so great. Can you tell us about any projects you're currently working on? Any other projects around environmental sustainability that you can share?
Well, I'm doing more films on native populations. We live in California, which was native territory. Most of Latin America was native territory. We destroyed that culture because they were natives. They didn't matter, right? So I'm working with some people who are telling the history of native people in the Bay Area where I live, and it's very satisfying. Because as Majo said, it's either no one cared about our story or no one told it the right way. And you can't do that without working with them. You should never make a film that you're not prepared to go back and show the people you made about it. They're the final judge. And again, they know more, so maybe you can't put everything in, but and I think they have a right to be skeptical, because they've been ripped off so many times. That even if they trust you, they say, well, let's see how it's. They're worried about it. So what Majo said, if you go back and show it to them and they're happy with it, and we're just not making these stories because they're interesting. We're making these stories because we hope it'll help people. Alberto was threatened and imprisoned and in great danger, and we were able to help, not rescue him, but help protect him. So that you have a huge responsibility when you take on people's lives. You've got to do it right.
Bravo, Rick. Thanks for sharing that. And Majo, what about you?
Always working on many projects. As a freelancer, you never know. So there's a lot of projects, but one that I'm really excited about is a short documentary that I'm producing, executive producer. It's an Ecuadorian filmmaker from the Amazon, and Rapa Nui native producer. Rapa Nui is called Easter Island. It's an island off the coast of Chile, but it's like a Polynesic, shares more culture with Hawaii, Tahiti than Chile. And it's a story about the healing powers of the ocean, and how the Rapa Nui people have used the ocean and as a way to communicate with the ancestors. So it's a more artistic and super visually rich story, which is good. This film, Water for Life, was a lot of information. It's also heavy. It's empowering, but it's a lot. It was monumental. That's a word I could use. So much footage, 3 countries. This is a one person, one character, not too many words, more visual. So I'm also exploring other ways to reach people with this film, more emotional, and yeah, excited about it.
I can clearly sense your excitement. That sounds amazing. I failed to mention that Water for Life is narrated by Diego Luna, which is lovely. What an amazing voice to add to such an impactful film. And LOLeros, be sure to check out Water for Life. It came out yesterday. Today is Earth Day. Happy Earth Day again. So be sure to check your local listings. It premiered yesterday. It's on pbs.org, the PBS app. It's available on iOS, Android, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Samsung Smart TV, Chromecast, and Vizio. I think I just named everything. So it's out there for you to consume. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Majo and Rick for your time. Thank you for coming on the Latinos Out Loud podcast. Thank you for your impactful work on the communities. And I'd love to have you back. La puerta está abierta ya. So for your other projects, please come back and talk to us again so that we can drive tune in and let the people know all the hard work that you're putting in the game. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you.
Thanks for having us on and helping us spread the word. We really appreciate it.
Hey, it is my pleasure. This platform is, and that's why the social handles are We Are Latinos Out Loud, because this platform is for us. It's not just mine. It's everybody's. It belongs to all. So, LOLeros, thank you for tuning into another episode of Latinos Out Loud. You could follow us, as I mentioned, at We Are Latinos Out Loud. You could follow me at Rachel La Loca. You could even give us a call. We have a phone number. It's 978 Latinos. And a website, wearelatinosOutloud.co. Don't go to .com. A Chinese agency bought that website, and unless you speak Mandarin, I don't think you'll understand what it says. So go to wearelatinosOutloud.co for more information on the podcast. And on that note, we're out.
It's the Latinos Out Loud podcast.